This space is full of narratives of past. The folklores, which often made its description more ornate than what an eye could see. The palaces, the alleys, the corridors and the water streams, which for centuries were enclosed within huge red walls. Built in the 17th century on a humble hillock near the banks of holy river Yamuna, this red sandstone structure has been a symbol of an imposing might. A seat of power that commanded the width and margins of an empire for more than 200 years. From witnessing the eras of turmoil to an unfurling of joy and ecstasy, laying the foundation of an independent republic. A bastion of supremacy, Red Fort is a story of several narratives woven in one. Located in the northern part of the city, amid the urban expanse that has grown manifold since the independence, this mighty red sandstone fort stands as the largest monument in Delhi.
Shah Jahan wanted a place where he can design a new city and a new palace of his own choice. He wanted to start from the scratch. So, and Delhi, if you see, Delhi is centrally located almost. If a person is in Delhi, he could keep an eye on the northwest, he could keep an eye on the eastern areas, also western areas, and so also the Deccan. So it was centrally located. So Shah Jahan decided to come back to Delhi. It has been deserted by Akbar because, Delhi reminded him of his father's defeat by Sher Shah Suri. So Akbar did not have any other reason to go to Agra except this. But Shah Jahan, he came back to the old capital city.
It's here India weaves together an emotional moment as Prime Minister unfurls the tricolour each time the day breaks on the August 15th. The moment is witnessed by thousands who assemble here, while millions in India and around the world are glued to their television sets. That one moment marks the cultural, historical and nationalist significance of the grand structure which has traversed through the annals of history. The foundation of the fort was laid on April 29, 1639. The date of laying foundation was decided after Shah Jahan consulted his Hindu astrologers and Muslim hakims. The architectural style, the design of its gardens, and the layout of palaces within the high walls bears an imprint of not just the Persian and Timurid style, but also of European and an ancient Indian one.
In planning Shahjahanabad and in planning this fort, there was also a Sufi philosophy which worked behind it, and according to it, the universe is a macrocosm and the man is microcosm. So if you see Shahjahanabad represented universe, so it's a macrocosm and the palace is the microcosm, and in that also, since it reflects the human body, the head is where the Diwan-i-Am, the main building, is there. So it starts from there. Jama Masjid is the heart. The lanes of bazaar, these are, and all the mansions, these were the, the nerves. And the Chandni Chowk bazaar, this was the backbone. And if you see from the Hindu Vastu Shastra point of view, the Karamukha or the bow shape is what has been selected the best for the palace. So if you see the Red Fort right from Akbarabadi gate to Salimgarh gate, and then the market bazaar and all those planning, if you see, it's like bow. And string is Salimgarh and Akbarabadi gate, and bow shape is the outer side of the fort along with the marketplace, and the arrow is Chandni Chowk Bazaar.
Nine years later, the fort was ready to welcome the emperor. It was April 19, 1648. The year was festive. These arches were lit with beacons of joy as Shah Jahan, the fifth Mughal emperor, entered Qila'e-Mubarak, as it was called. For the next 210 years, his progenies and successors carried forward the Mughal Empire from this fort until the empire declined, collapsed, and was replaced by the British East India Company. Bigger in size than the fortress in Agra and Sikandra, the Red Fort was the center of all activities of Shahjahanabad, the city commissioned to be built by Shah Jahan, who chose this site driven by the thought that Delhi, ruled long by the litany of illustrious rulers, had an aura of spirituality which no other city had.
This area was known as Noorgarh. They were hillocks, they were big hillocks, they were smaller hillocks. There was the Jujbal and Bujbal Pahadi. So one of the hillock was selected for Jama Masjid, and this Noorgarh area was selected for this city. And the extreme eastern corner of it was selected for the palace, because in Islamic architecture as well as in Hindu Vastu Shastra, the river bank is very auspicious. So they wanted river bank also, they wanted a higher place also. So that is why this area was selected.
The city of Shahjahanabad survives today as maze of labyrinth and old heritage structures, outgrown buildings, commercial properties, wholesale markets, and several monuments littered in its width and margins, but alive in its character as a nerve center of multiple activities. Built at the cost of nearly 1 crore in those times and spread over 250 acres, this fort is often built to represent not just the height of political power, but also the cross-cultural influence. The fort also marks a shift of thematic style in the building of monuments of Delhi, with an exclusive use of red sandstone to build the walls.
Red sandstone especially, it was used by the Mughals extensively, because when Akbar made Agra his capital, Fatehpur Sikri is where the quarries of red sandstone were. So it was procured from there, and it was cheap also. It was easily available, cheaper also. Earlier we find that grey sandstone was the thing, and chunar, which we call chunar sandstone, that was used in the ancient period, not the red sandstone. And red sandstone was started by Alauddin Khilji. So from Alauddin Khilji, then the later Lodi, some of the Lodi buildings, and then extensively in the Mughal period we find red sandstone. And because Delhi was connected with Agra through Yamuna, so the river Rhine traffic, it was very easy to bring that cheap and easily available red sandstone from the Fatehpur Sikri quarries.
So the earliest Mughal buildings are built by Babur and Humayun, and they are very much emulations of Timurid architecture back in places like Samarkand and Bukhara, that is in Central Asia. But the thing is that the early Mughals didn't have the very sophisticated engineers and the kind of building, they didn't have the knowledge of the building techniques, nor did they have the right materials to build buildings as splendid as those back in Samarkand, Bukhara.
Within the layout of the city, Lal Killa or Killa-i-Mubarak was enclosed by high walls housing Shah Jahanabad within its 14 gates. As of today, 6 of them, Delhi, Turkman, Ajmeri, Lahori, Mori and Kashmiri Gate, gives way inside an ever busy and often claustrophobic lanes of what was once a decorated city. Once inside, the sheer architecture of its several spaces draws an instant appreciation. The style chosen for this fort is often termed as Shah Jahani, a unique mix of imperial expression, rich design, texture and color, cobbled together in formalism, where everything seems to fall within the straight line.
Shah Jahan had a very distinguished style of architecture. First, the perfection of pietra, which is an Italian art of inlaying precious and semi-precious stone in a and creating a particular cavity and then filling it with a precious and semi-precious stone. So perfection of pietra plus cusp arches. Before Shah Jahan, you will not find multifoliated arches. So multifoliated arches is the chief characteristic feature of the Shahjahani architecture. Perfect symmetry, second feature of Shahjahani architecture. Third is the perfection of pietra. Fourth is the baluster columns. You know, the Guldasta style columns. That is also one of the typical of Shahjahani features. And also the play of water and greenery alongside the marble pavilions or the marble buildings.
Shah Jahan's architecture, you've achieved a classical type style, an emphasis on symmetry, on balance, on not over ornamentation. The common view is that starting with Aurangzeb that you have a decline. I personally object to that idea. I think what you have is a change in taste that reflects a change in the economy, a change in the social structure, a change in sort of government, especially with the multiple wars that are going on down in the Deccan. But the common view is indeed that Shah Jahan's architecture is the epitome of Mughal architecture, and I think that's probably pretty fair. I mean, certainly the Taj Mahal represents an outstanding example of sort of balance and symmetry.
Lahori Gate, a grand gateway, gives way inside the city within the city called Red Fort. What was a straight view entry inside the fort was modified in the reign of Aurangzeb, Shah Jahan's son, who had commissioned the building of these barbicans in front of Lahori and Delhi Gate.
Aurangzeb placed that there fairly early in his reign, probably for, I mean, surely for military purposes, wanting to fortify this palace. And Shah Jahan, who was imprisoned in the Agra fort, wrote him a letter and said, "You have placed a veil before the palace." So he wasn't too happy about it. But he never got to see it, so.
These barbicans were later chosen to house a pavilion for an Independence Day address. One of the three main entries of the fort, Lahori Gate, was used by courtesans, ministers, and the members of public. The second gateway, called Delhi Gate, was used exclusively by the emperor and the families to visit the city of Shahjahanabad, while the third gate, situated innermost under the Musamman Burj facing Yamuna River front, was strictly for private use by the emperor and his procession from the riverine moat.
So all of these palaces are, fortified palaces, are constructed roughly in the same manner. That is, there's a major entrance. The entrance feeds into the increasingly more private areas. In the case of the Red Fort, the main entrance would have been the gateway that faced the direction of Lahore, so it would have known as the Lahori Gateway, and that feeds off of the central street, main street that was today we call Chandani Chowk. The entrance has now been expanded by Aurangzeb, so the entrance would have been more straightforward than it looks like today.
Passing through Lahori Gate, this vaulted arcade housing a string of double-storied shops called Chhatta Bazaar, or a covered bazaar, assumes the first introduction of the fort's tryst with the royalty. The passage also housed the famous and oft-talked about Meena Bazaar, that was specially built for, of, and by the royals. This was where the ladies of royals and their companions hung out, shopped, and weaved narratives which are now among popular folklores and court gossips.
He was a great admirer of the new things. For example, when he went to Peshawar in 1646 and this project was going on, Red Fort project was going on. When he went to Peshawar in 1646, he saw a covered market which was built by one of his grand noble Ali Mardan Khan. And the moment he saw that, he knew that has to be incorporated in the Red Fort, and he sent his plan, his architectural plans to Ali Mardan Khan, and he said, "I want the same market here." That's how Chhatta Bazaar or Bazaar-e-Mukassaf, it came into being. So it is the first covered market in North India.
The tunnel of double-story Chhatta Bazaar opens at a huge courtyard of the fort. Once a water stream used to flow through this courtyard, the feature which is so often found in Shahjahani's style design. The courtyard, whose centre was called Haud Nahr, also formed the intersection of roads leading to and fro Lahori Gate and Delhi Gate. The designers of the fort, Ustad Hamid Lahori and Ustad Ahmad, made the most of its proximity to the river Yamuna. Once a water channel called Nahr-e-Bahish, or a stream of paradise, ran through it.
Every Islamic garden has water as a feature. Even if you look at, for example, excavations from Lalkot down in Maruli, you will see that the Sultan's palaces down there had central courtyards with fountains in them. So this is something that's from the larger Islamic world, and has been a feature of Indian Islamic material since the inception of Islam in India. But indeed it meets its highlight probably, I would say, in the 17th century, having it run through the entire palace, not just have a fountain as we see earlier.
Yad Bakhsh Bagh and Mehtab Bagh, two prominent Shahjahan-era gardens, were once a telling testimony of the sophisticated yet ornate waterworks inside the fort. While Yad Bakhsh Bagh survives today in a truncated form after it was partially destroyed by the British forces during 1857 uprising, the Mehtab Bagh has morphed into just a shadow of its past. At each end of Yad Bakhsh Bagh stands two white marble pavilions, Sawan and Bhado, named after Hindu calendar, another telling tale of Shahjahani style.
And in Hayat Bakhsh garden, there used to be a pool at the middle of the garden, and in that there were around 48 silver springs were there, and around it there were total 112 fountains. Then in the entire Mehtab Bagh, again you will find rows of sprinkles, silver sprinkles there. So water played a very important role because the plants which were there, it was also very carefully planted. As we know that Mughals were very fond of citrus trees. So citrus trees, plus especially in Hayat Bakhsh garden, flowers which were blue, purple and white in color. These were planted, and there used to be one coffee plant here in Hayat Bakhsh garden. Yeah. So water lifting device was mainly in the Shah Burj, and from there water was transported to the entire palace, to the Mehtab Bagh, to Hayat Bakhsh, and also to the Seraglio garden. It was all there, and also to the Imtiaz pool.
Zafar Mahal, this red sandstone pavilion built by Bahadur Shah Zafar in 1842, a reminder of the lasting legacy, his last structure to be built by the Mughal inside Red Fort. The designing of the fort also took into consideration complex power matrix. Naubat Khana or Nakar Khana, the arched building, not just separates the inner court from the outer one, but also defines the dynamics of hierarchy and position inside the fort. An entrance to Diwan-i-Am was only possible after Arz Begi made announcement of the arrival of the emperor from Naubat Khana.
Now, this Jilukhana is where where the nobles used to dismount, they used to deposit their weapons, they used to place their horses in the stables, and then they used to cross the Nakarkhana. No one except emperor and the princes, but they were only allowed to ride on their horses while crossing Nakarkhana. Now, Nakarkhana is also very important. Nakarkhana is where the royal music was played most of the time. And Nakarkhana has a significance. If emperor was in the fort, then it used to play 5 times a day. If emperor was outside the fort, he had gone outside, then it used to play 3 times a day. And on the days of his birthdays and other ceremony, they used to play it entire day. Otherwise, 5 days, 5 times or 3 times a day. They used to play, and the royal musicians were placed there.
After 1857-58, the British, in their extreme state of paranoia, removed all of the boundary walls of the Red Fort that would have been originally enclosed various compounds. So you get to this gate, which was known as a Nakarkhana, which is where the drums and music was sounded to announce the imperial presence.
Even devoid of its riches and vastly reduced and faded might of Mughals in the middle of 19th century, under poet Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar, the Red Fort still commanded an inspiration. It's for this reason it became the ground zero of a first major expression of any organized resistance against the imperialist power. It all began as revolt of sepoys in Meerut cantonment. Very soon, the revolt accentuated with the participation of general masses. Land revenue policies of the East India Company, new service conditions in the army, and rampant racial discrimination in the British Army were among the main factors leading to the revolt. The mutiny was also backed by Rani Lakshmibai, the deposed ruler of Jhansi, Nana Sahib Peshwa at Kanpur, the kingdom of Awadh, and a faction of Gwalior state. Followers of Birjas Kadra of Awadh, Babu Kumar Singh of Bhojpur, and Rignarayan Singh of Tulsipur too had joined the revolt against the British. After raising revolt in Meerut cantonment, the Indian sepoys broke open the jail, and on May 10, 1857, they marched towards Delhi. The very next day, on 11th May, the revolting sepoys proclaimed Bahadur Shah Zafar as Emperor of Hindustan. Zafar, though had reluctantly agreed to be the Emperor of mutineers, nonetheless, it was a tall order, given the stronghold of company rule deterred many rulers.
When they all, the soldiers, when the mutiny, especially when the Bengal native infantry, they revolted, the mutiny started there, and then it came to Meerut in May. So they all decided to come to Delhi and to make Bahadur Shah Zafar, who was up till now just a nominal emperor, to make their leader. And Bahadur Shah Zafar was already in his late 70s. So, probably, I'm not sure, the idea of coming, being once again the ruler of Hindustan or the leader of these mutineers was the thing that struck Bahadur Shah Zafar's head, that he said yes, or it was probably the insistence of Bakht Khan, who came and marched with his soldiers and was standing right here in the Red Fort and demanded Bahadur Shah Zafar to be their leader.
Red Fort was secured by rebel sepoys, but that was short-lived. September 1857, the British finally attacked Delhi, and the city around the fort witnessed bloodbath for the next 6 days. Delhi had fallen once again. In her streets lay the blood of hundreds of martyrs and innocent, and her gates, once impregnable, were riddled with mortars and gun shelling. It was also the formal end of Mughal Empire after the last of its titular head, Bahadur Shah Zafar, was captured by British forces from his safe house in Humayun Tomb, brought to the Red Fort and put to trial. His sons too were captured, put to trial, and executed by company's military major, William Hodson. Today, the spot of their execution lives on the street leading to Delhi Gate, called as Khuni Darwaza. These army barracks were soon built by British in what was both a symbolic and military assault on the Red Fort.
After 1857 revolt, they wanted to take revenge, and especially they wanted to take revenge from the Mughal emperor, their symbols, their places. So you'll find they tried to erase the history of the Mughals and they did a lot of vandalism in Shahjahanabad, especially the Muslim soldiers, the emperor, his commanders, they were targeted. So they attacked Red Fort and they destroyed almost 80% of the buildings. Even the compartments which separated one building from another, these were also broken, and they built barracks here.
While the barracks were built over the desecrated remains and rubbles to house the military and sepoys inside the fort, the remaining palaces were too shown scant regard when they were put to use by the occupying forces. Diwan-i-Am, or the Hall of Public Audience, a palace where wazirs and ministers assembled before the emperors, was used by the British as a hospital. Gone were the beautiful enclosures and pinnacles before Diwan-i-Am, as they were all razed down to the ground. What still remains, however, is the very identity of Diwan-i-Am as a sanctum of the Red Fort. The 9-arched pillar rectangular hall of Diwan-i-Am houses the royal throne.
Diwan-i-Am is actually, if you see the position of the throne, which is 6 feet above the ground level, the floor level. The place, the emperor, if he sits there, he would face Makkah. So he'll be facing west side. Okay. Now there is also a concept of emperor being the shadow of God on earth. Shah Jahan was a very religious person also. So Shah Jahan wanted that his throne should be below the level of Jama Masjid, where the main Qibla is there. So if you see, if you can measure, you'll find that the hillock which was used for Jama Masjid is higher than the hillock which was used for Red Fort.
Placed under the marble canopy, the chamber is densely studded with breathtaking Pietrodura work on marble stone.
Probably the most remarkable part of the Red Fort, to my mind, and its still extant, is the throne in the public audience hall, which is, this huge elevated platform where Shah Jahan would have sat enthroned. It is very elaborate in that it has these kind of bulbous columns that are very elaborately carved with floral motifs, which are the most elaborate Mughal carving until that period. Most Mughal buildings have relatively little carving on them. The throne is an exception. It is ornately and profusely carved with floral designs, as if the throne were to represent kind of an eternal spring, as if the Mughals were always sort of flourishing, so to speak.
But it was a peacock throne, which once upon an era formed the talking point not just inside the fort, but also drew admiration and affirmed the riches and wealth of the paradise called India. Placed in Diwan-i-Am, the white marble palace inlaid with Pietrodura depicting flowers and birds, the peacock throne, till date, remains an irreplaceable identity of the most beautiful chamber of the Red Fort. It was here at Diwan-i-Am and on the peacock throne, the emperor met with his private audience, selected guests and ministers.
Peacock throne was designed by one of the very famous royal goldsmith. His name was Bibadal Khan. So it was made of solid gold. And why it was called peacock throne? Because there's a variation in description. According to one description, there were two peacocks at the canopy of this peacock throne, and according to one description, if you go by Bernier says one big peacock with his tail full of sapphire, his sapphire and emerald, and his neck is made of emerald. In his beak there is a string of pearl, okay, and then you have rubies at his crown. So he describes peacock throne, and there is also description in Muhammad Waris, where Muhammad Waris talks about the weight of each and every stone that has been studied in this peacock throne. So Kohinoor was also here. Kohinoor was also studied here. Later on it was taken out, but it was originally studied in this throne, as has been mentioned by these accounts.
But the absolute glory and magnificence of fort suffered a massive assault in 1739 when Delhi was sacked again by Persian raider Nadir Shah Durrani. In the reign of one of the weakest and incompetent ruler, Muhammad Shah Rangila, Delhi was plundered and thousands of its people were massacred. It was a big blow to the Mughal Empire, which was also gradually withering away. The peacock throne too was captured and taken away by Nadir Shah Durrani, the last of the recorded chronicle about the marvel of this palace. It has since been lost forever.
Peacock throne was taken by Nadir Shah, and it is said that Nadir Shah's army, on their way back, it was attacked by some marauders. So it was broken and they had melted it. So the molten gold, the gold was taken by someone, the rubies was taken. Last time it was reported that the base of that peacock throne was kept in the Tehran museum. Okay, I don't know what has happened now, but last it was reported to be in the Tehran museum.
But even years later, empty of its belongings and stacked with narratives, this splendid Moorish palace still shines with the stories and legends of its beauty, and for the reasons such as this, perhaps it's rightly inscribed inside Diwan-i-Am, if a paradise be on the face of the earth. It is this, it is this.
The dwellings of the imperial family and the important rooms used by the ruler himself, the emperor himself, for example, the private audience hall, the Diwan-i-Am, are all going to be at the very end of the fort, of the area that overlooks what would have once been a river. Buildings meant for the imperial family were built strictly in marble, and ones that were meant for other people were built largely in red sandstone. So the being over the river would be cooler. It would be like having your air conditioning, right? And you'd also have a good view.
Several other quarters like Tasbih-Khana, the chamber for private prayer, and Khwabgah, the sleeping rooms of emperors, lie close to Diwan-i-Am. This place too became an object of derision by the British troops, who were said to have held a celebration here after reclaiming the fort. And it was from this very balcony at the eastern end of the fort, King George V and Queen Mary gave public audience after the Delhi Darbar of 1911. Following string of palaces on the southeastern flank of the fort lies Palace of the Princess, the Mumtaz Mahal. Once housing a chiseled drawing room, Choti Baitak, it was used as a prison by the British. Begum Zeenat Mahal, wife of the last Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar, was the last of the imperial queens to reside in this beautiful palace. Years later, destiny once again chose this fort for another trial. The one which marked the saga of glorious redemption, igniting a nationalist fervor when the officers of Indian National Army or the INA were put to trial here in the winter of 1945. In what could be argued as a turning of tables over the hurt collective conscience of the Red Fort following its desecration in 1857, these barracks are witness to an incredible epoch which is etched among the pivotal facets of a freedom struggle. One of these barracks housed the office of the INA Defence Committee, the team of defence counsels who fought for Colonel Prem Singh Sehgal, Major General Shahnawaz Khan and Colonel Gurbaksh Singh Dhillon.
Now these INA trials, as in the words of Smith, who was the head of Intelligence Bureau, that this INA trial, it united India from Coromandel to Kashmir as it has done, as they were never before. And because the three major religions of India were reflected. Secondly, this was held at the time when most of the parties were going to contest for the election. So INA trial became a symbol of their prestige and also their political propaganda also. As a result of which we find Muslim League also joined Congress party for defending the INA war heroes.
While the trial were conducted within the tall embankments of the fort, outside the air was stirred with loud chants and slogans. Chalis Karoro Ki Awaaz, Sehgal, Dhillo, Shahnawaz. Among the first of three decorated officers, Sehgal, Dhillo and Shahnawaz were represented by famous lawyers of the time, which included Bhola Bhai Desai, Asaf Ali, Tej Bahadur Sapru, Kailash Nath Kajju and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru.
It was done in a very tight security because when these trials were held, there was a riots in Calcutta for these releasing of these INA war heroes. There was also Air Force mutiny. There was also Royal Navy mutiny in Bombay and in other areas. Out of 78 ships, they revolted against the Britishers. So these heroes were kept in a close custody in Salimgarh Fort.
Such was the fervour generated by the trials that the government of the day had restricted even BBC from broadcasting the news in any form. But even before the INA trials, it was Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's proclamation at the formation of Azad Hind which had put the spotlight back on Red Fort, rekindling a popular interest in what was the most prominent non-colonial structure in Delhi. Netaji had reportedly visited the unmarked grave of Bahadur Shah Zafar in Rangoon and had come up with his famous call, Chalo Dilli, and holding a victory parade on the graveyard of British Empire at the Lal Killa. Chosen by the destiny to celebrate the birth of free India, Red Fort will remain as one of the greatest human construction in concrete, stones and metal. Summarizing not just a rise and fall of the eras, but also sustaining and strengthening the idea which embodies the nation of more than 1 billion.
India united for the first time, seen from the Red Fort in 1857. India united for the first time, seen in the Red Fort during the INA trial. And India united for the first time, seen on 1947, 15th August 1947, when Pandit Nehru hosted the tricolour.